focus on how to audit your website for technical issues, optimize your website structure, and improve its speed and accessibility. So stay tuned. SEO can roughly be divided into three branches. First, you have on-page SEO, which is content in the form of written words, pictures, and video. You have off-page SEO, which is backlinks, social signals, press releases, Google My Business, etc. Then you have technical SEO, which is about the accessibility of your website. Now, although you need all three to rank well, technical SEO actually comes first. You have to build a strong technical foundation for your website before you create content or promote it off page. If you don't have the technical aspects of SEO nailed down, the other parts of SEO will fail. All right, step one is to check the indexing of your website. An obvious place to start is to see whether your website is indexed at all. And by indexed, I mean whether or not Google has crawled your site and has your pages in its index. Go to Google and type site : your website domain without a space after the colon. This will show you how many pages Google has indexed. So you can see in the example here, I've put in the site : then the entire URL, and then you're going to get the results, and you can scroll through and see how many pages are actually in Google's index. All right, you can check the indexing of your website also by heading over the Google Search Console and clicking on the coverage report. So you look over under index, coverage. This report shows how many of your pages are currently indexed, how many are excluded, and what are some of the indexing issues on your website. Now, another place to monitor your indexing is the domain strength report in Website Auditor. The tool will show you the number of pages indexed, not just in Google, but in the other search engines as well. So here are some of the details. It'll show you what's wrong with pages with a redirect, crawled but currently not indexed, excluded by a no index tag or not found, which is a 404, discovered but not currently indexed. Now, whichever tool you decide to use, the number of indexed pages should be close to the actual number of pages on your website. So if you're running an e-commerce website, then the number of indexed pages should correspond to the number of products you've uploaded. And Google may not always index all pages or products of your website. All right, let's look at another section. Indexing and crawlability. Now, indexing errors happen when you've asked Google to index a page, but it is blocked. For example, a page has been added to a sitemap, but is marked with a no index tag, or it's blocked with a robots.txt. To resolve this issue, check whether the pages that's supposed to be indexed, if they are. If yes, then remove whatever is blocking it. If no, then remove the page from your sitemap. So you can see over here, indexing and crawlability. This is in Website Auditor. resources with a 400 status code, resources with a 500, resources restricting from indexing. So in the first one here, resources with 400 status code, this is 401, not authorized. When you look through this, I can see here that this refers to a WP-JSON, which happens to be part of structured data. This doesn't have to be indexed by Google. This is something that's not seen by users. It's in the background as part of what we call structured data. So you have to look at all these carefully. And I've looked through here, and all 116 of these are referring to WP-JSON, which is the coding. Okay, here's another one, resources restricted from indexing. 116, again, these happen to be with the WP-JSON that's not authorized. Disallowed by the X robots tag automatically. When you include this structured data, and I'm using a WordPress plugin to put my structured data on. Okay, on step 3, you want to audit your site structure. A proper site structure is important for users and search engine robots. Furthermore, internal linking helps spread ranking power, so-called link juice, among your pages more efficiently. You can audit your internal links using click depth. Just make sure your site's important pages are no more than 3 clicks away from the home page. Now in Website Auditor, which you can see on the screen here, you click on Site Structure over here, then Pages, and you'll see the results in the right-hand side. And you can see the click depth. Now, these are showing on the screen as 1. Now, if you have more than 3, you may want to look at that and change what's happening there with your links. Okay, step 4, amplify your crawl budget. Now, what am I talking about, crawl budget? That's the number of pages that search engines crawl during a given time period. Crawl budget isn't a ranking factor by itself, but it determines how frequently the pages of your site are crawled and whether some of them are being crawled at all. Google is not mandated to crawl all the pages on your website. Now, depending on how important your website is, Google will give you a certain amount of crawl budget. If your pages are light and your resources are easy to access, then this budget will go a long way. But if there are too many redirects, dead ends, then your budget will be spent before it even gets to the important pages. So here's what you can do to amplify your crawl budget. One is ignore low priority resources. Now, it's common to use GIFs or GIFs, GIFs, however you want to pronounce it, memes, videos to kind of liven up your pages. These resources are meant for entertaining your users, but they may not be actually matter to search engines. Now, the good news is that you can ask Google to ignore these resources and go crawl somewhere else. To do that, edit your robots.txt file to disallow individual resources. Now, if you have a WordPress site and you're using the Yoast plugin, you can easily do that. So here's an example where it says user agent and the asterisk. Now, the asterisk is a wildcard. It means all the search engines like Google, Yahoo, Bing. It refers to all of them. To disallow, images and the file name. You just want to put whatever that file name is uh, for a picture, a GIF, a video, whatever you want to do. And you can do it for certain file types. So you can disallow the wildcard .gif and the sign for the money sign there. So this allows any image that's a GIF, a GIF. Okay, here's what you can do to amplify your crawl budget again. Avoid long redirect chains. Now, what does that mean? When there's too many redirects on your website, Google will usually stop following the trail and move on to other parts of your website, which means some of your pages may never see the light of day. That's on top of wasting a bunch of crawling units for nothing. So we have what we call 301 redirects, which are permanent and usually used to solve problems with duplicate content or if URLs are no longer necessary. So the use of 301 redirects are absolutely legitimate, and it's good for SEO because 301 redirects will funnel what we call link juice from the old page to the new one. Just make sure you redirect old URLs to the most relevant pages. Now, in certain cases, either due to a bad .ht access file, which I don't recommend trying to modify that file unless you really know what you're doing, or due to some deliberately taken measures, a page may end up with having 2 or more redirects. So it's strongly recommended to avoid such redirect trains longer than 2 redirects, since they may be the reason for multiple issues. Now, they could be, there's a high risk that a page will not be indexed as Google bots do not follow more than 5 redirects. So too many redirects will slow down your page speed. Every new redirect may add up to several seconds to the page load time. And it could lead to a high bounce rate. Users are not willing to stay on a page that takes more than 3 seconds to load. That means they're going to leave, and that's called a bounce. All right, to keep this from happening, you can go to Website Auditor and go to Site Structure up here on the left. Then Site Audit, and you're going to look down here, pages with long redirect chains. If you find any such pages, fix the redirects so they will go straight to the destination page. Now, I had a couple of them with long redirect chains over here. So I clicked these little arrows here, and it fixes it. Within about a minute, it fixed them. And then I get this message: well done. There's been no pages with long redirect chains, longer than 2 redirects on your website. So that's how you can fix that. Okay, here's how you can manage what we call dynamic URLs. Now, these are URLs that have characters like question marks or commas or underscores or numbers. They're not user-friendly, and they're not descriptive, and they're harder to anybody to memorize. To increase your page's chances to rank, it's best to set up dynamic URLs so they would be descriptive and include keywords, not numbers or other parameters. It's also common for content management systems to generate a bunch of dynamic URLs. Basically, each of your pages can have a few different URLs depending on how you got there or the types of filters that you've used. Now, Google may view each of these URLs as a different page, even though the content is mostly the same. Now, to check for dynamic URLs, you go to Website Auditor again, click Site Audit here at the top, and look for dynamic URLs down here at the bottom. Now, to stop Google from crawling a bunch of nearly identical pages, you can ask it to ignore certain URL parameters. Now, in this case, this website does not have any dynamic URLs. It says 0. If there were, it would show on the right-hand side what your options are and where these dynamic URLs are. All right. One other way you can do that is you can launch Google Search Console, go to Legacy Tools and Reports, and then click on URL Parameters. And if you don't have Google Search Console for your website, get that installed. It's free from Google. Google Analytics is part of it also. And if you're not sure how to install those, there's many articles and videos on how to do that. All right, so before you tell Google which parameters to ignore, click the Learn More link over here to educate yourself about this tool. So here it says, help Google crawl your site more efficiently by indicating how we should handle parameters in your URLs. Use this feature only if you're sure how parameters work. Incorrectly excluding URLs could result in many pages disappearing from your search. So there's a button here, you can click that parameter, but I would recommend clicking on the Learn More so you can learn more about the URL parameters. I'm not going to go through that today. All right. Next, take care of any broken links. Now, this can happen very easily. When a search bot hits what we call a 400 or 500 level page, a unit of your crawl budget goes to waste. That's why it's important to find and fix all broken links on your site. Now, broken links not only waste your crawl budget, but also confuse visitors, and they eat up link juice. Now you can go to Website Auditor, Site Audit, Links, look under Links, and then Broken Links. Now it says here, there are no broken links on this website. If there were broken links, take a note of the URL and remove or update the link. And this tells you about this SEO factor. You can read that about what broken outgoing links, what it can do, and about how it affects your SEO. All right. Step 5, clean up duplicate content. Now, duplicate content can be a problem for SEO. If there are 2 or more nearly identical pages on your website, which one is to be indexed? What if Google decides that your duplicates are a sign of plagiarism? So it's best not to risk it. All right, so one place you can check for duplicate content is to go to siteliner.com. siteliner.com. Enter your website's URL, and it'll run for a few minutes depending on the size of your website. And then go down to the section that I'm showing on the screen here and look at your duplicate content section and see what percentage of duplicate content you have on your site. Now this one has, which happens to be my website, it has 7%. Anything over 10% should be looked at. Now it has what we call common content, which is words or phrases that are very common to other websites. And then it tells you that your unique content. Now you're always going to have some level of duplicate content. These may be words or phrases that are very commonly used depending on what your site is about. And you can click this button over here to see your duplicate content, and it'll show all the URLs and where the duplicate content came from. Very, very useful. All right, step 6, test and improve page speed. Now, Google expects pages to load in 2.5 seconds or less. Now, that can be a difficult speed to obtain, and unless you have a very simple website with not a lot of resources. But the average page speed across the web is about 12 seconds. Pretty horrible. So chances are you have to improve your page speed as well. Now, Google's been touting for some time their core web vitals. Now, these 3 metrics designed to measure the perceived speed of any given page. These are the 3 main areas, what they call the largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift. Now, these are not very descriptive titles, and you can read about these if you want by going to the web.dev/vitals website. That's a Google website that will explain those. And there are, well, first, I put in this website, in the Vitals website, I put in this government website to show see what the speed is, performance, and so forth. And so it is not very good. The performance is only 22 according to Google. The first contentful paint, in other words, how long it takes for the first thing to show up on the screen, 21 seconds. That's a huge amount of time. So they got warnings here on everything except cumulative layout shift. Anything that shifts on your website when it's loaded. You'll see that when a lot of ads are loaded on a web page. Then they have an accessibility area, best practices, and even SEO. So their overall performance is not very good at all. But you go to that Google website Vitals, and you can put in your URL, and then you can see all the information here. And they have a score scale. Google wants to see everything in the green, 90 to 100, which is actually pretty difficult to obtain, but it can be obtained. All right, now, if you have a WordPress site, there are a number of plugins that can help improve your site, and I put some on here that I use. There are other ones that are maybe good also. For caching, I use WP Super Cache. All these are in the WordPress depository. You can search for them, install these plugins. Some of them are free. Some have free versions and paid versions. Reduced image file size, I use a Magify. Many people use other ones. Optimize CSS, JS, which is JavaScript, images, and more. I use Auto Optimize. Very good plugin. Control which scripts to add, async or defer attribute. I use an async JavaScript. And to speed up your WordPress site, I use a paid plugin called Perf Matters. It's very, very good. So those are the ones I use to help speed up websites for my own and for client websites. All right, number 7, check on your HTTPS content. Now, this stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. The S means secure. Google started using HTTPS as a ranking signal in 2014. Since then, HTTPS migrations have become increasingly common. Today, according to Google, 95% of websites use the secure transfer protocol. If your site hasn't got HTTPS, you may want to consider switching to it. Now, if your site is already using the secure version, it's important to check on common HTTPS issues as part of your SEO audit. Now, again, you can go to Website Auditor, Site Audit, and then look for encoding and technical factors. Now, you want to look for HTTPS pages with mixed content issues. Now, these type of issues arise when an otherwise secure page loads some of the content like images, videos, scripts, CSS files over a non-secure HTTP connection. Now, this weakens the security of your page and might prevent browsers from loading the non-secure content or even the entire page. And you also want to look for pages with multiple canonical URLs. Now, if you don't know what canonical are, canonical URLs play a really crucial role in ensuring that your client's website or your website isn't penalized by search engines and the SEO is very strong. They make sure that your search engines don't get confused when different URLs point to the same content or web page, and can help inform which URLs have identical or highly similar content. So you want to tell the search engines like Google which page is a canonical page, which page is the first one, the most important one. Now, you don't need to add what we call canonical tags to every page on your site. You should use it only to avoid duplicate content. That's what you're trying to avoid. All right, step 8, you want to make sure you have a mobile-ready website. I still see many websites out there that are made with older versions of content management systems and page builders that are not mobile ready. Now, in 2018, Google started using mobile first indexing. The algorithm set search engines to crawl the mobile versions of websites instead of their desktop versions. And this literally meant that the mobile version of your pages determines how they rank in both mobile and desktop search results. So Google's mobile-friendly test includes a selection of usability criteria such as viewport, configuration, use of plugins, and the size of text and clickable elements. So it's important to remember that mobile friendliness is assessed on a page basis. So you need to check each of your landing pages for mobile friendliness one at a time. And you can let Google know about your sitemap. Now, you can submit it manually to Google Search Console. This is where you can submit a new sitemap or review one already submitted. So you can go to Google Search Console. Under Experience, you have Mobile Usability. You click on that, and it will tell you if there's any errors on any of your pages. So you don't have to look through every single page. Google Search Console will tell you, and they'll even send you an email Now, sometimes you'll get some false reporting from Google on this. I've had it several times where they'll say there are mobile usability problems on such and such page, and then you have to validate them to fix them. And you go and look at that page, and there's seems to be nothing wrong with it. In that case, go ahead and validate it and wait for Google, usually 2 or 3 days. They'll come back to say, well, there's still a problem, or yes, it's been fixed. You don't have to do anything else. So on this particular site, there's no real issues here, but there was an issue back in May. So here's the details. The error was text too small to read, clickable elements too close together, content wider than the screen. But all these were fixed and validated. There's a button you can click on there that says validate. And all 3 of these passed, so it's not a current problem. So you have to stay on top of this. All right. Review or add a sitemap. Now, a sitemap just tells Google how the organization of your website is, and it makes it easier to crawl. Now, sitemaps are not absolutely necessary, but it does help to have one. You can easily add a sitemap to your website. One place is going to xml-sitemaps.com. They have an online generator. You just enter your URL, your website, and click start, and they'll do it for you. Now, another place you can go to get an XML sitemap is if you have a WordPress site and you use Yoast SEO, they'll create a sitemap for you. This is meant by consumption of search engines. You can find out more about XML sitemaps on sitemaps.org. So in this case, it created, I cut out the part of the URL here, and it'll put posts, pages, products, categories, whatever is required, and then it has a sitemap.xml. Okay, and it just creates a directory that the site's search engines can go through and find your site a little bit easier. And every time you update it, if you use Yoast, it'll automatically update your sitemap. You don't have to keep redoing your sitemap. Okay, now once you create a sitemap, you can let Google know about your sitemap. You can submit it manually to Google Search Console. So go to Google Search Console under Index, select Sitemaps, and here you can enter your sitemap. Now, just make sure that you have the correct URL or name of your sitemap. You can get it from Yoast or whatever that you used. And then you're going to paste your sitemap into here. It'll have a sitemap index.xml. And here is a sitemap that was already submitted. And the status is a success. And this is how many URLs it discovered using that sitemap. So it makes it a little bit easier for the search engines to crawl your website because they know how many pages you have on that site. Doesn't mean they'll crawl all of them, but they know how many pages you have. Okay, finally, step 10 is ask Google to recrawl your site. Now, you can send your updated URLs for recrawl to Google Search Console with the help of the URL inspection tool. But if you find any problems when you do a site audit, like using Website Auditor, once you fix them, you can ask Google to recrawl your pages to make sure all your changes are taken into place. So if you just have a few pages that need to be recrawled, again, you can go to Google Search Console and you can use the URL inspection tool. So you just enter the URL of the page you want to be recrawled and click Request Indexing. And it'll take a few seconds or maybe up to a minute to recrawl it. You can also test live URL on Google to see if your page is in its current form, and then request indexing. So here's one example. It says the URL that I entered is on Google. It can appear in Google search results if not subject to a manual action or removal request with all relevant enhancements. So you can view the crawl page, or you can request indexing. So here's what the coverage is in this particular case. It's indexed but not submitted in the sitemap. And the page is mobile friendly. So it gives you some information here about that page so you can decide whether to request indexing, or if it looks like it's already indexed, then you can move on to your next one. And so if you made some serious changes to your site, for instance, you move your site from HTTP to the secure one, HTTPS, you introduced structured data, or you did some essential content optimization, or you want a blog post that you just completed to appear on Google quicker. There's believed to be a limit on the number of recrawl actions per month, so don't abuse this if you have a lot of URLs that you want re-indexed or crawled. And once you request indexing, that means they're going to recrawl that page. It could take from 10 minutes to several weeks to show up in Google's index. You can't really speed that up, so don't do it more than once. Now, there is an alternative to recrawls to submit a lot of changes to your sitemap. Now, Google doesn't guarantee to index all of your site's pages, but if your site is fairly small, it probably will. So you just have to wait for Google to get around to it. So don't get impatient if it doesn't show up, in the next day or the next week. Google has its own time slot to do that. Okay, finally, on a regular site audit should be part of your SEO strategy. Whenever changes appear on the web, they may influence rankings either positive or negative. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. If you need help with SEO on your website, you can reach out to Lacy SEO. Either at 915-494-2382 or 915-471-9796, or reach out via email at info@bluelacyseo.com. Thanks for watching. Everybody be blessed, and we'll see you next time.